News Update.
Special report
with Carrie Harrison.
Despite the efforts of thousands of firefighters, the biggest blazes remain uncontained, with weather conditions and climate change expected to fan the flames for days to come. In LA County, 179,000 people are under evacuation orders, with another 200,000 on alert. More than 10,000 buildings have been razed, with 60,000 more at risk. Insured losses expected to exceed $8 billion. A man has been arrested on suspicion of starting a new fire, but the causes of the original fires remain unknown. National Guard troops have been deployed to prevent looting, with 20 arrests made so far. Fires have also affected celebrities, including Mel Gibson, Leighton Meester, Adam Brody, who have all lost their homes. Fire officials are battling 5 major fires, including the Palisades and Eaton fires, which have scorched nearly 20,000 acres and 14,000 acres respectively. Questions are being raised about the city's preparedness for these fires, with some firefighters reporting hoses running dry. Mayor Karen Bass has faced intense questioning about her leadership and the water issues. Meanwhile, KTLA reports there's a camp set up in Brooksville Park in Pasadena that's feeding people, getting donations, and telling anyone who needs anything to please come on down. I'll continue to bring updates on the latest developments. For now, this is Carrie Harrison with your special report on the Los Angeles wildfires.
from Los Angeles. Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, I mean, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth,
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
With me, Carrie Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison.
And it is Rethinking Heroes with Carrie Harrison on this special edition of Rethinking Heroes. Apologies for my voice, but it's torn by smoke. Me and tens of thousands of others of you here. And I'm certainly not the only one. In just a few minutes, I'm going to open up the phones because it's critical that you be heard during this time of horrific disaster. I want you to be able to resonate with your neighbors, offer information as you know it, as you learn it, and most importantly, know that you are not alone. In fact, following this 1-hour broadcast, I'm going to continue on a live video stream on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, and our KPKFK Facebook page to take your then online calls for a second hour. I'll give you more information on that shortly. These fires don't seem to want to stop. LA's densely populated urban landscape, including miles of chaparral and dry eucalyptus trees, also include flammable material with hanging power cables, a city landscape with wooden telephone poles going back to the 1920s, homes built with wood to satisfy earthquake codes. Then you add in the bone-dry low humidity, the high-temperature Santa Ana winds to fan wildfires, all blowing over the hilltops and down through the canyons. The concept of the complete loss of the Pacific Palisades is unthinkable. The remains look like Vesuvius without, thankfully, that same loss of life. We've been fighting a wildfire with urban water systems, it turns out. Corner fire hydrants and people attempting to use garden hoses. It's not that there's not enough water here in Southern California. It's that there's not enough water in any given area for the several hours that you need it to saturate those fires. Meanwhile, President Trump has often voiced criticisms of Los Angeles and California, but many of us here in the city are hopeful that his administration will extend real support in the wake of the recent devastating fires. As we start to rebuild and recover, we look to the federal government for leadership and assistance in addressing the challenges ahead, ensuring the safety and resilience of greater LA. We're now the center of the world's attention. We're being televised 24/7, not like we used to when it was red carpets. There seems to be an ever deeper scrutiny into not only what happened, but the emerging politics of our very vast area. A Mother Jones analysis of voting data may explain why you're hearing and seeing things on Fox, CNN, and newspapers that don't seem to make sense in the middle of a disaster. Their data shows that a recent presidential election, ours, rich voters remained loyal to Kamala as Latino and Asian voters moved to the right, revealing fissures in a Democratic Party that sees itself as a champion of the working class and is being hammered today by news pundits all across the nation. Comparing the recent presidential results versus 2020, 5 cities in Los Angeles, and we're comprised of some 65, 67 different cities all tethered together with no borders that you can actually see. But 5 of these cities saw shifts towards Donald Trump ranging from 36% to 46%, 43% rather. But why? How is this going to affect our great city with recovery efforts pegged to a seemingly hostile Washington, D.C.? Joining us now is Noah Lenard with Mother Jones magazine. Noah was Mother Jones' lead immigration reporter during Donald Trump's first term. And since then, he has written about labor, electoral politics, and the war in Israel and Gaza. Prior to Mother Jones, he was a fellow at Washingtonian magazine and got started in journalism by freelancing in the heart of it all, Mexico City, some time ago. Noah Lenard, welcome to Rethinking Heroes.
Thanks for having me on, Gary.
We are glad to have you here today. I wish it were a happy, normal day. It is not. So we're just going to have to flex a little bit here, if that's okay.
Oh, of course. Yes. Now, this article came out only a couple of weeks ago, but it feels like it was published at such a different time and in a different city entirely.
And yet it speaks to what may come, and what people are actually wringing their hands about is there going to be open minds and reasonable help from people that don't think some people, you get it. Let's just jump into it. The
absolutely.
source of this bizarre phenomenon where working class Latino voters in Southeast Los Angeles have been flocking to the Republican Party despite Trump's inflammatory rhetoric on exactly them and clear threats to deport exactly them. Yet, here it is. He got their support.
Yes, no, it's a big shift. And I spent the week before the election in the Central Valley of California and saw very similar things, and the results were very similar there. I mean, it's been a massive shift. Like you said, the data shows about a 40% shift towards Trump in the last 8 years in Southeast Los Angeles. And I know your listeners know this, but Southeast Los Angeles, it is overwhelmingly Latino. Huntington Park, the main city I focused on, is 97% Latino. And it's specifically a very working class and often in some cases poor community. So it's a specific slice of LA's Latino community. But yes, there's a massive shift. It's worth noting overall it is still voting Democrat, but it's a huge shift. It used to be 88% to 8%, an almost 80-point gap, and now that's been cut in half. So, and it's not just that Democrats are staying home too. Donald Trump is getting 3 or 4 times as many votes as he used to in many of these precincts.
Noah Lenard, how do we reconcile the fact that affluent, educated voters in Los Angeles are sticking with the Democrats still, while working class Asian and Latino voters are increasingly drawn to the GOP? I mean, talk about low-hanging fruit that should never disappear from your platform that's supposed to be about working people. They're like, now we're going over to the GOP.
Yeah, it's quite striking. I mean, on the flip side, if you look at, the west side of LA, coastal communities, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, et cetera, these places have basically stayed the same over the past 8 years. There's been almost no shift. And in some cases, Democrats are actually doing better a little bit than they were 8 years ago. So how do we explain that? I mean, I think a lot of that is Donald Trump himself. He is a very, distasteful and crass person. I mean, to a lot of particularly college educated voters. I mean, there's a level of, your listeners know it. He's extremely disliked or hated by many people, particularly college-educated voters. But when I talked with more working-class voters and Latino working-class voters in either the Central Valley or in Southeast LA, what I heard over and over again was just the sense that the economy was better. 4 years ago, things were more affordable, homes were more affordable, groceries, and a hope that Donald Trump would bring back the economy that he had 4 years ago. Obviously, I think it's the economy is much more complicated than that, and COVID and supply chain disruptions and all that. But that's what I was hearing from a lot of voters as to why they were voting for Trump. And also the one other thing is, they lived under Trump for 4 years, and deportations didn't go up as much as maybe they expected. If they have undocumented relatives, they probably weren't deported in that period. So people thought, hey, we survived it once. We could again.
Do you sense that there's any awareness, Noah Lenard with Mother Jones magazine, any awareness with any of these people that while purging up to 30 million people from the United States, really what's going to happen is they're just going to get visas, which are then going to peg them to a corporation, which makes them indentured servants, as opposed to blowing them all out? I think that's what we're ultimately going to see, is a way to legally peg them to something, but then they are forced and required to do all sorts of things that they wouldn't when they're just picking vegetables and going to bed. All that to say, do you feel that they have an awareness now that, say, Lord Kikius Maximus, I only use the name that Elon Musk rebranded himself with, Lord Kikius Maximus, is now importing at least 700 people of the same skin color, but that have education levels useful to Lord Kikius Maximus. In short, they're great rocket scientists or this, or that. Yet the MAGA people that voted for Donald Trump are not worthy of even swabbing his decks. So there seems to be an awareness of this happening. Is there resentment starting, or is the Kool-Aid still being guzzled?
I mean, I think it was also a reluctant vote among some of these voters. And two, I think also, one important note here is, of course, we're talking about Latino voters. So we're talking about, Latino Americans who are U.S. citizens. And I think, although I did speak to one undocumented Guatemalan woman in Huntington Park who was excited that Trump won, I think the people who are voting for Trump kind of by definition are not really at risk of deportation because they're U.S. citizens. So I think that also colors it. People across many communities are thinking of their own pocketbooks, and because they don't have that risk, it makes it easier to vote for Trump. But I also think one other thing I heard too is just because people are Latino, or Asian doesn't mean they necessarily support every piece of progressive immigration policy. So I did hear some frustrations with the situation and chaos that existed at the border over the past 4 years under the Biden administration. And there was also some resentment because the population of people who is coming has changed. Traditionally was overwhelmingly Mexican people coming to the United States across the border. Now it really is people from all over the world, lots of Venezuelans, Ecuadorians, but really many countries. And because some of those people are getting work permits through the asylum system, there is some resentment of saying, hey, they're kind of getting an easier ride than we had when maybe we came 20, 30, 40 years ago and later were able to obtain citizenship through different means.
I also think of all the vets, those that might still be alive after World War II, very few of them still, but fighting fascism, fighting Nazis for real. Not that anyone knows what that really means anymore. Certainly in the Korean War, they also had a sense. Many of our veterans remember the oath that they swore. The idea, whether it's real or not, of invading Canada, which is a NATO partner, which would trigger Article 5, which would mean France would come to the aid of Canada. So would Germany. So would all of Western Europe, plus a bunch of other countries. I mean, it's so insane. It's impossible, not to mention the Nuremberg laws, which many of us still enshrine as being important. All of this, I think, is used. So we're looking at the left hand while the right hand is dealing with hush money payments and having 34 felonies. And I imagine, Noah, if you had one felony, you're not going to be allowed on the airplane. And they're certainly not going to give you an alcoholic beverage or bring a suitcase or even go out of your house with a suitcase. One felony. But all of this is so we simply don't look at who it is and we fight in the corner, whether we fight over abortion, whether we fight over the sudden dreadful notion a drag queen could drive from one street to another. Yep. It could happen. And therefore, all hands on deck. It is the most ridiculous circus level, fusillade of nonsense. And the rest of the people of Earth are looking at us. We don't seem to see it ourselves. So I'm just wondering, sort of, as we wrap this up with an eye to the fire, and I really appreciate you coming on because this is going to help. because so many of us in Los Angeles have the same expectation that we're going to have the same government that we have right now that is offering all kinds of assistance and help following this disaster. We may not see that from the same administration that is promising to make America better again, great again. I would say that America's second largest city in the United States, Los Angeles, the media capital of Earth, is going to be pretty important in making America great again.
Mhm.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I think, predicting what whims Donald Trump will have one day out, let alone a couple weeks out or months away, is can be a fool's errand. I hope, of course, that he supports Los Angeles through this tragic and unimaginable moment. And as talking about kind of the political challenges ahead here too for the Democrats, I think like one other thing that I would mention here is, Democrats are in a tricky place because the voters who are sticking with them and have stuck with Harris, the other issue they have is they actually do tend to be more conservative than a lot of the Latinos who are abandoning the party. It's very paradoxical. But for example, if you look at the minimum wage vote, it was the voters who stuck with Harris who were actually way less likely to vote for raising the minimum wage, that ballot measure that was in California this year. Whereas in Huntington Park, they drifted towards Trump, but also were more likely to support the minimum wage. So the Democrats are in a real challenge right now in terms of how do they build a coherent base that actually makes sense if you are to be a working class party.
I very much appreciate your time, my friend, and also recognize that during this particular time, I think everyone is going to get together and many people will dump their belief systems that were stirred up out of nowhere, out of a vacuum. People didn't have these belief systems until they were invited to have them. And I think we're going to be back to lots of plebiscites and interest in creating a really great place to live and restore it. Much as you, I believe you're up in the San Francisco in the Bay Area.
Well, I used to live there. I'm in New York these days, but my in-laws are from LA. They're actually in the evacuation warning zone in LA. So they were at a hotel in Manhattan Beach a couple days ago. They're back home for now and kind of keeping an eye on if it moves to the mandatory zone. So I'm following this very, very closely for personal reasons as well.
Well, I'm looking forward to having you on. We'll flesh this out and the next thing you're doing at the same time. And I want to thank you for having come on today amidst all of this. We've been exploring how a city that happens to be under Democratic leadership is recovering from its worst disaster on record and how it sits in the crosshairs of the incoming Trump-Musk administration. We're talking with Mother Jones Magazine's Noah Lenard, lead immigration reporter during Donald Trump's first term. So he's going to be a critical voice for us to check in with on and on. Since then, he's written about labor, electoral politics, and the war on Israel and Gaza. Previously, he was a fellow at Washingtonian Magazine. And if you Google Noah Lenard and Mother Jones, you're going to see a ton of very important and cool stuff. Thank you for coming on today, my friend.
Thanks very much, Gary.
All right. Coming up with this third most destructive fire in all of California history, you are not alone. You've not been abandoned. Coming up in a moment, your calls, your voices, information you might have, and the impact these multiple elements have had on your life. Again, apologies for my smoke-torn voice, but my mission is to stay here with you through thick and thin. We're going to take the calls of impacted people first, understanding that the trauma is widespread for the many millions across our area. Your Harrison hotlines are 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-KPFK. You can also connect. We're going to try some new technology here as a video call on any of our live streaming platforms like YouTube and Instagram, Twitter X, or LinkedIn. All of them using a variation of Carrie Harrison. When you get there, it's just as easy as Zoom. Simply go to kpfk.net. kpfk.net, different from our .org, of course. kpfk.net will connect you directly to Rethinking Heroes as a video stream so you can do it on your mobile phone, your smartphone. That's kpfk.net, or, of course, pick up the phone right now and let's hear from you and what you're going through at 818-985-KPFK.